Hey there, welcome to this Koala sampler tutorial episode, and today I want to dive in and take a look at the brand new update, which if we go into our burger menu, then the little settings here, extras tab, it's 1.4081. That is the update just after the big mixer update. Now we're going to go through the release notes, just go quickly through the list and just check what's been updated. It's a minor update, I would call it, but it's got a couple of interesting things. So let's skip over to the App Store very quickly. I just want to show you the release notes. We have attack and release controls are now more sensitive. So let's have a look at that. I'm not sure how exactly we can sort of test this. I've got a sample here. Let's open this up. Ideally, I should have done some kind of comparison with the waveform before and after, but either way, they are apparently more sensitive now. So let's take a quick listen. What I want to just check is one-shot mode because I haven't tried this yet and there's something I'm curious about. But let's start with the attack. And of course, when we change our attack here, we are putting a fade into this sample. In fact, what I want to do, let's just make sure that this sample is nice and kind of harsh at each end. Let's just use tools and crop, truncate that down. And then try playing around with the attack. So I'm expecting to hear the sample start to fade in slowly. Yeah, and that seems to be working just fine. And of course, with release, we're doing the opposite, so it should be fading out. Now this is the thing that I was kind of curious about. So since I've owned Koala, I've always needed to enable one-shot mode here in order to get my release to work. I don't know if that's on purpose or whether it's like a little bit of a bug or an oversight, just nobody's mentioned it. Kind of curious, so if you leave it in the comments whether you have the same issue. It's not really an issue because we can still, change our attack and release and bounce the audio down, but it does seem to be a thing that only happens for me when I'm in one-shot mode with the release, so hopefully now when we play with it. Yeah, you can see it's now working because this one-shot mode is enabled. Very strange little quirk. I'm not sure why, if it's deliberate, why it would be like that, but anyway, that's what it is. And of course, if we want to just check these here, let's say we put a really long release on this and then we bounce this audio down. What I'm expecting to see is this waveform change to a really long fade out. And it does just that. So really good stuff. Let's go back to the release notes anyway and keep moving through. If we come along here and go back to the App Store. So we have two new bus effects, a noise gate and a ring modulator. So let's take a look at those. And I'm assuming they're not performance effects, but they will be mixer effects. So we can check that by just going here, but yeah, pretty sure they're mixer effects. If we go to bus A, let's open this up. And the first one I can see right there is the noise gate. If you're unfamiliar with the noise gate, I'm not going to get into all the effect settings and everything else. Essentially, it acts like kind of what it suggests. So it's like a gate that you can open and close. And depending on threshold, and you can sidechain, you can do a bunch of different stuff with this. You can create kind of like pumping effects. You can just make like stuttering kind of effects. It's pretty handy. I think it can even be useful for kind of like filtering out unwanted noises here and there if you're clever with it. But we've now got a noise gate, so very welcome addition. And of course, we've got a ring modulator, which again is just another style of effect. We could test that one, I suppose, just quickly here. Kind of winging this video because I've just seen the update. That one will do. We'll just take that sample. This might be long enough just to play around with. So we're just going to play the sample through. Just make sure it is a one-shot sample, which it should be. Now we need to send it to bus A. And there you go. You can hear that ring modulator start already. And if we open that up and play with just some of the things real quick. Before that gets too annoying, but you get the idea. So a nice, another welcomed effect there that has now been added to what is already, as I've mentioned before, a pretty comprehensive list of effects. So yeah, always nice to have some more to play around with. What else do we have in this list? We now have sidechain now as mic as a source. Bit of a strange sentence, but what it means essentially is that you can Now choose sidechain here, and I'm assuming when I click on my source, microphone is now listed here, which is great. Used to just be the buses, but now if you want to sidechain to your microphone input source, you can do that. So I guess that could be handy for certain things. What else is going on in here? You can now switch between perform effects and mixer when recording song. Okay, so I'm assuming, I've never tried it personally, but we've got a bunch of sequences here. We've made our song. You want to use the record function here so you can record your song. And what it does is when you press play, it begins to record your song, including if you play around with effects or whatever it is you're going to do. It records all of that, and then you can use that like, WAV file at the end. We're just going to test it with this here. I'm assuming before, I've never tried it, but I guess you couldn't switch between views here, between the mixer and the performance effects. So let's just make sure it's working. We'll click OK, press play. So of course the song's now recording. I could do stuff here. I'm wondering, lets me open up the effects, which is pretty cool. So you could record some effects in real time. And I'm assuming before you couldn't change view here. Now you can, so now we can use our performance effects as well. Yeah, you get the idea. So that's a pretty handy function. Never tried it, but at least you know now. If you've tried it before and it wasn't working, it now is. Let's check what else we have. So this is the big one for me, multiple select edit buses. So I mentioned this in the previous video that I made. You can do edit, of course, now, and we're holding edit and grabbing multiple samples at the same time. And what you could do was you could play around with pitch and volume and reverse or whatever it is you want to do, all of the sort of editing effects. You could do that already. However, the mix tab used to be grayed out. And what I was saying in the last video was that when you want to now send things to your output buses, you kind of had to do them on a pad-to-pad individual basis. But lo and behold, in this latest update, we now have access to this tab. So if we want to send all of these samples to a new bus, say bus D, I can do that. And they are all now going to bus D. So really happy with that. I think that's a real, improvement in workflow. These little micro actions can add up when you've got a lot of samples that you need to do. So being able to grab multiple at the same time, really, really good stuff. Now, I'm not sure. I think the rest of it might be bug fixes. Yeah, let's just talk about those. So bug in trim silence, or there was a bug in trim silence. I'm not sure. Either way, I hadn't noticed it. But if you'd noticed some kind of bug in the trim silence option, now seems to have been fixed. Can now change the pitch of multiple pads. Also, I hadn't noticed that as a bug, so maybe certain users were getting that. The extras settings are scrollable again. Don't know about that, so we'll take a look. Can now put sidechain on the main bus. I'd never tried it, but seems pretty self-explanatory. And reverb perform effect was a bit quiet. Also, hadn't really noticed that, but I guess that's been fixed. We can just check out a couple of those things. If we go to the mixer, I guess before you couldn't add a sidechain here, which you definitely can now. So really good stuff, because I'm assuming it'd be pretty handy to sidechain to the main output channel. And I've completely forgotten what the other one was. What was the other one we were going to look at? Oh, the extra settings are scrollable again. So I'm assuming that means when we go to settings and we go to the extras tab, I guess there was a bug that stopped this from scrolling. So maybe you couldn't see show EQ, or perhaps you couldn't see the stem splitter neural network. But as you can see now, seems to have been fixed, certainly on my device. So yeah, all in all, not the biggest update, not that it was, we were waiting on a big update, but some really welcomed additions here. The new effects being added is great. And certainly for me, the ability to grab all of these samples at the same time and send them to a particular bus, I think is, that's going to be really good for workflow. So I'm going to leave it there. That's pretty much everything that's been updated. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'll catch you in the next episode. Take care.